Hey folks, this is Tolly and welcome to some more game dev. We're back again with some fog controls. So we talked about this a little bit in the last stream, but we went ahead and picked up a asset pack from the Unity Asset Store, which basically did everything that I want for Fog of War, as well as a lot more. I can bring that up again actually. Let me just get that volumetric fog Unity Asset Store. Hold tight. This one. We ended up picking up, well, one second. We're doing a great start to the video here, but essentially we picked up not this pack, but now I can't find it. This one. The fog and lighting bundle, which we have not dug into the fog side of this, or sorry, the lighting side of this. We've only dug into the fog side of this, but it's been working out pretty well for us in terms of like kind of creating this like atmospheric space. The big thing that me and Drixie were working on is kind of, number one, getting the kind of coloring and like depth kind of set up in a way that we thought worked pretty well. But also we've been playing around with like what happens when you die from running out of time, kind of bringing it into like this darker red. We may still continue to tweak this, and we've also made it so now in the Goddess Realm we have this kind of like base cloud area that's kind of housing a lot of the space. Again, the density of how thick the clouds are could probably be adjusted. Me and Drixie may continue to refine some of this stuff, but it's feeling pretty good. There are some weird pieces. So here, like, we pop off the fog is kind of like appeared for a moment and then dissipates. Like, there's some weird stuff happening that I just need to kind of clean up and polish. Not happy with some of this. And as we move into this next room, we can kind of see, oh, this one doesn't have the right settings. Okay, well, let's do it this way. Forest TO2. Let's turn off spawn all so that we spawn individually. I just want to show like the way that the fog density is different for unrevealed tiles versus tiles that you have essentially revealed and are kind of at a lower like level of fog. The idea we're trying to come across is that like this is the Demon Lord's miasma, and as Hero moves through the space, you're essentially cleansing it. And I feel like this is starting to get closer to that idea, but isn't quite there. And we still need to do a little bit more work. And some of that will be today's stream. The getting it to like change color and grow in size when Hero runs out of time is like handling basically this fog system with a little bit of the cutscene system. So when I hit the debug to end the round for running out of time, all of this glowing, changing color, it gets a little thicker, all the alpha returns to all the revealed tiles. That's all handled through our cutscenes. So when we run out of time, we're saying tint the fog this color, adjust the fog's height, and reveal tiles full fog. And these sequence steps are working great, but we want to have it so that when you fully reveal a space, so if we toggle back on debug spawn all, when we fully reveal an area, we'd like to have it so that that area actually has like still some amount of fog, but like a more cleansed looking effect to it. We might need to close and reopen Unity because these load times feel like we need to do a refresh on it. But yeah, so if this is a fully revealed room, one of the other settings that me and Drixie worked on was this idea of Fog of War cleansed. And we kind of liked this version for like the world has been like cleansed of that kind of dark purple Demon Lord miasma, and this is more of like a light fog, which kind of has a little bit of the colors that we're using for the theming of the goddess, but in order to make this work, I'm gonna need more setting changes. Right now we can adjust the fog's color and its height, But in order to have it so that we can switch to that when we fully reveal a room, we're going to need these other settings to be able to change. So we got height under control. We should be able to do that. The height gradient preset is going to be a tricky one. So this is choosing like the kind of color profile based off of the thickness of the fog. So the higher it up, the more pink it is. The more in the middle, it's like this bluish and purple hues. We also want to change the specular threshold. We want to change the wind direction so that the fog feels like it's moving in a different direction. Turbulence needs to be different, and the kind of sun-based color needs to be changed as well. So I'm just going to jump into that, and we're going to start building a lot of those sequence steps to get this up and running. So this is the fog one for tinting. Let's pin this. I feel like tint fog is going to be very similar to the sun color. Maybe this is fog sun color. This should just be essentially the exact same code, but on a different part. So instead of a sequence step for modifying the kind of main color, we are going to be looking for the sun color. Now, I haven't worked with this package, this Unity asset package, very much. So I don't know what all these things are. Is it... Oh, it's literally just sun color. Okay. So if we just do this, I think that might be good enough. And that should have us being able to modify the color of the sun parameter over time. Okay, that's one. So that's another one done. Let's mark these down. So we have the ability to change height. That's good. We'll strike that for now. Do we not have a strike option? Fine. So ones we still need to do is specular threshold. That should be very similar to adjusting the fog's height. So we'll copy this class, paste that in there. Adjust fog specular threshold. A little wordy, but accurate. Okay, and then instead of target height, this will be target specular threshold inside of the constructor. Gonna need to update these names as well. And then instead of modifying the height, specular threshold, we're just going to modify that value. Okay. Oh, one problem I'm seeing. We need to get rid of the dash copy at the end. Cool. Another one down. I think turbulence should be identical. Same idea. We're modifying a float value essentially, so we should be able to copy this one. Get rid of the dash copy at the end. And now we're going to adjust the fog's turbulence. Good. Same deal. Come in here, rename a couple of variables. This becomes target turbulence. And we just need to make sure to update all the constructors to have the new class name, and we're good on this one. And I anticipate it will be a little bit more copy and pasting, but then we're going to get to the hard one, which is going to be the height gradient. Turbulence, yep, right there, perfect. And here as well. And that should be good. We're going to do wind direction because I expect that will also be relatively straightforward. And then we will try and figure out height gradients. I imagine the height gradients is, I don't know. It's either going to be really straightforward like these other ones, or it's going to be a massive pain. So this one was just fog wind direction. Same idea. And this one becomes target wind direction. And then this one's a vector 3. Now I'm hoping that's not too big of a deal. I think DoTween should still have the capabilities to modify these. Why are you upset? Is it because I didn't rename the constructors? Oh, it's because when I was copy and pasting, I got the .cs name in there. Moving a little too quick. Okay, that's good. And then, oh, I guess we didn't change this in the other ones, but these variables are also mostly wrong. Yeah, all of these need to get updated, and I think that means we need to go back and change that in the other examples as well. I mean, we don't have to. The name can just be wrong. Okay, so this goes here. This becomes wind direction. This becomes wind direction. And then this is going to try and output a vector 3, vector options. So this needs to be updated as well. Vector 3 options, array options, is that what it is? No, it should just be vector options. Okay. Cool, and that should be wind direction. I'm going to go back through real quick through turbulence, and I'm just going to do a quick replace on the height values. Again, this doesn't really matter for the sake of getting things up and running, but what I've found lately is that when I make shortcuts on stream for the sake of like making things more viewable, of like, oh, I'll go back and update that later, I have not been updating it later, and that has led to no real problems really, but it's more just an annoyance whenever I come across a spot where I'm like, oh yeah, I did want to come back here and refactor this, but I'm doing something else now and I don't want to. So it's just going to be easier to fix it in the moment while it's the thing I'm focused on. Sun color. This one's fine because color is a generic enough name. Okay, so I think wind direction should work. Let's see, can we do the hard one? Height gradient. Adjust fog height gradient. Height gradient. The reason this one's more difficult is it is a not a simple class. Unlike, you know, moving between a float or a color or a vector 3, which do tween, which is our primary like tweening system that we use, is like those are all simple things that it knows how to like interpolate between. But height gradient, I don't think is a simple concept. Height gradient. What is this object? This is a gradient. Okay. A gradient is a Unity concept, though. I didn't realize that. So it's not something custom for... It's not something custom for Unity. Or for this package. So that means we should be able to just use gradient here as well. We can. I'm going to just name this target gradient. I don't need to add the word height to this, I don't think. Now this is going to output a... Yeah, see, I don't think DoTween understands this part. Yeah, this is going to be the trickier one. So we can't just tween this value. So what is a gradient? Like, I guess it makes sense because, like, tweening from what to what? It doesn't even make sense what you're modifying. We essentially have a list of alpha keys and color keys. And like, what if those lists don't match between the two gradients? How do you interpolate between those? It just doesn't make any sense. I'm gonna have to write some custom logic here, and we might have to make some assumptions. That the points are identical, or at least the numbers in the array must be the same in order for this function to work. Now this is a list of sequences, so we should be able to loop through each of the values in the volumetric actually, I guess in the target gradient dot alpha keys. So this is a gradient alpha key. And we will make a DoTween sequence for each of the height gradients dot alpha keys. Still not smart enough. DoTween has the concept of a vector option, but I don't think it has the concept of a gradient alpha in it. All this is just a alpha and a time percentage. I guess we need to, this alpha keys doesn't make sense because that's an array. Okay, what if we do a proper array? Int I is equal to 0, or a proper for loop here where we actually do have an index value that we can work with. We're going to make a pretty bad assumption, which is that the alpha key lists are the same. And maybe we'll write a little bit of error catching for that. But what if we do this, this, and this? Okay, DoTween still does not detect that as valid. So we are going to have to do alpha dot alpha and dot alpha, and we're going to have to do this twice. These need to be floats in this scenario. This needs to be float options. And then that all works, and we want to make 2 of these for each step. We want to do a loop through for time and alpha. Now, if the volumetric alpha keys does not equal the target gradient alpha keys, I think we need to just debug.log error and say, hey, inside of the adjust fog height gradient sequence step .cs alpha key gradient alpha key lists counts did not match. Okay. I'm going to simplify this. We don't need these brackets. And then we're going to have to do the same thing for the color keys. So for color keys, same thing, but the difference here is instead of alpha, I'm expecting this will be color. Yeah. Now that causes a problem. Because we're going to need 2 different types of lists. Color. And then we're going to need a float variation here, and we're going to need to make the float variation one more clear. This bottom section down here with updating speed is more for our screen system. If we were to ever somehow have clouds in the behind a screen or something, usually we use this update speed so that if you push A through multiple screens, it progressively increases the speed of these sequences so that the tweening gets faster and faster the deeper you go through screens. Because our input system doesn't really care whether or not you're like, it doesn't wait for the animation to finish on the screens. It lets you go as far through the screen logic as you want. So this is just like progressively increasing the speed of these as we go. I don't think this needs to be inside this function, though. That was true for some of the other ones we were copying and pasting, but realistically, we should be able to do this for all of the game objects, and then update the speed one time. Okay. Now in here, instead of wind direction, we're going to be doing gradient. And then we're going to paste that a couple of times. Now, oh, I also need to change the type. Resolved? Resolved. Okay. We're going to close Visual Studio and Unity because it's been running a bit slow. And then we will fix any bugs we have, and then we'll give this a shot. But I think this should be all the tech we need in order to start playing with the actual cutscene side of it and, you know, getting kind of the switching from one type of fog to the more cleansed version. Alright. Let's change up the background. The background audio. Yeah, so I feel like also worth noting, I did do some work around the checkpoints. This is mostly done. Skill node placement is kind of still in progress. I've done more work that I have not been tracking so much during or through the balsamic stuff. This has mostly been for stream, and as we've been streaming less, it definitely feels like there is less tracking here. All right, let's see. Are there any errors? There are not any errors. Perfect. Let's go take a look at our... let's do TO4 as our reveal room. Yeah, this already has some effects in here. Let's go to the scenes, dungeon, forest, TO4. We're going to make sure this is using the correct version of the fog. It is not. We're going to do this one, which I believe is the correct one. It looks right. Yes. Yeah, okay, these are the right values. Cool. Now, when we complete this room, we will call this cutscene, which is going to change the fade. I kind of want to start over. So we have all of these fog values. I need to adjust the height. And this is fog volume, is what this is? Yes. We're going to adjust the height, and we want to bring it down to... a height of 2 from where it normally is. I feel like there's something else missing here. If we go to scenes, dungeon, TO4, save the scene in its current form. This fog volume is not moved. I feel like that's something me and Drixie did. I feel like we adjusted this fog to be a little bit lower. Did I not save that change? Yeah, I feel like it's supposed to be more here, and I think I missed that during some of our other modifications. So then the question is, the settings we want is the cleansed version. So that's what I'm going to be trying to recreate through our cutscene. Our cutscene is going to try and morph the settings of the fog to look like this. Now, is that still looking okay at -3 versus here? Yes. Okay, I definitely think that's supposed to be lower. Okay, so we're going to go back to TO4, because that one is a much smaller map, so it's much easier and quicker to fully reveal it for the sake of testing. So yeah, we'll have this at -0.3. And then the inspector here, we're going to clamp this on cleansed. It already is. Perfect. So the differences between these two, in fact, if we add another inspector and we put it here, looking through the normal fog that we have all the time and the cleansed version, we're mostly looking for any values that are different between these two. And I think we set them up so that they're as similar as possible. The height drops a little bit. The alpha is the same. The color is the same. The height gradient is the other large one here. Specular threshold I want to bring down to 0. I think is going to be better and more accurate. The turbulence, the height, yeah, okay. Or the turbulence in the wind direction is a little different. And the sun color is a little bit different as well. I'm going to just turn this into a swatch so it's easier to keep track of. Shadow intensity, everything else is mostly the same. So this should be the same values I have written in Perforce or PureF. So the only one that's really confusing is the gradient. I do want to double check to make sure that the gradient is actually the same values between the two of them. So we're here with this one. This one has 1, 2, 3, 4 alphas and 5 colors. And the one that we want to be using, only has 2 colors. That's fine. We just need to make them identical. And that should do it. Now it has 5. And this one has 5. 4 on top, 4 on top. Okay, we're going to save this as a new preset. So because they have the same IDs, they should blend between each other fairly nicely. Actually, one better thing I could do is if I can try, might not be able to do it, but if we can get the positions relatively similar, this one's at 59, 52, 59, 52. Oh, shoot, you can't undo. You have to, the gradient stuff doesn't let you undo stuff. So 59, too far. 52, those should be close. And then this one has one at 21. That's the same. 32. Perfect. And then one at the very end. Okay, so they should be in relatively the same spots. So the main thing that'll change as we kind of switch between these two gradients will be that the colors and the alpha values will be modified. Okay, so TO4. Fully revealed cutscene. In here, we want to have the height value be the same as this one, so 2. We want to have... I think we're going to get rid of the exposure stuff. We're going to do that a little bit differently. But let's just get it transitioning over to the new version, and then we'll go from there. This one should be a simple one. We're just setting this to a value of 0. We do want to give this an amount of time. Let's say over 2 seconds to start. Need to give it an entity. Okay, and then we also... Specular threshold sun color. over 2 seconds, non-blocking, out quad. And then we want this swatch for what we want to change the color of the sun to. Ambient light, I think, is all the same. Wind direction, that's the other ones we need to do. So wind direction needs to change. That's going to be non-blocking over 2 seconds, changing to 0.1, 0.1, 0.1, out quad. And then turbulence. Order doesn't really matter here because they're all going to be playing at the same time. We want to set that to 1. I think that's all the settings we care about. Go back to pure ref. Turbulence, specular, sun color, height, wind direction. That should be all of them. The last one here is going to be the gradient, which I'm not sure what the UI is going to look like for this. Oh, wow. It just worked. And can I just choose this one? I can. Crazy. I guess that makes sense because it is a Unity parameter type, which I really wasn't expecting. We will do delay, and we'll just add a delay at 2 seconds at the end. We could just set this one to blocking as well, which would do the same thing, but I'm just going to do it this way. Okay, so now if we run the game, when we fully reveal a room, it should transform the fog completely from the Demon Lord's miasma to more of the Goddess Realm cleansed fog. That did not do anything. It did not believe that the... Okay, so I think it did lower and do all the other stuff, but it did not work with the gradient code. So close. So why did you think that the alpha key and the color values were different? Thinks they're both different. Just waiting for Unity to give us control back as it thinks. I'm gonna assume that it's mad because of some breakpoint issues. Delete all breakpoints, stop, re-debug, attach. Okay. All right, so moving forward, we should hit that breakpoint, which I did not set. I did not re-add it, so we'll add that back in. And now when we fully reveal a room, this has 4. Oh, I see my absolute ridiculous mistake. We're not checking to see if their lengths are equal. We're checking to see if they are equal. Yeah, that would do it. It's possible we should still breakpoint and see if other parts of that work, but... No errors, and we definitely saw the fog get like lower. But the height gradient, which is what's affecting the color, is definitely not working. I guess one thing we could do is check the other values. I imagine we should be able to see the differences if we close this inspector. We should see these values change. We do, but we don't see the height gradient change. Interesting. Can we look at the height gradient? It looks identical. Yeah, and if we just did that, that would be enough to switch it. So it's just not affecting it at all. All right, let's reattach the debugger. It didn't give us an error, so they are matching, so it should be going through and creating all of these dew tweens, and it should be... I can't see much else that we could do to change that. Like, that just looks like it should work. Unless we can't dynamically change the height gradients like what I'm trying to do here. Yeah, we get past both of these, and we're going to loop through the length of the alpha keys of the target, and we're going to find the height gradient for the volumetric profile, which it is not letting me preview. This all looks like it should just be working. Like, yeah, it's pretty messy that we have to make so many of these sequences. But this is essentially setting up a getter, which is getting the alpha value of the volumetric profile's height gradient alpha key at this index with this alpha value. And this is getting a setter so that this thing can set the value as we transition between them. And this should be transitioning between the target gradient's alpha value at this location and the time at this location. The only other thing I could imagine is that the values are mixed up, but even then, even if the ordering was somehow wrong between these, it still shouldn't matter. Because the colors are definitely doing things as well. This is 5 keys. It's going to loop through 5 times. And the profile settings for height gradient also has 5 keys. don't see a reason why this wouldn't work. And then in here, we're just going to set the timescale of all of these do tweens to 1, essentially, which is the current value. They're already 1, and they're just getting reset to 1 because this hasn't been sped up or anything. Interesting. Like, I can adjust these values. Okay. Let's come at it from a different angle. What happens if instead of doing all of this tweening logic, we just do volumetric profile dot height gradient is equal to target gradient? What if it's just a straight swap? I would expect this just pops the color. Yeah, let's get rid of the breakpoint so that we can see it happen without the Visual Studio popping up, but that does work. So as a fallback, we could do this to just be like, oh, the color just changes. But I would love if I could actually have the colors transition from this purple to the kind of more bluish yellow rather than having that pop, because that pop is pretty intense. And I can see everything else is animating. Okay, different question. What if instead of using DoTween to modify these values, what if we still loop through everything and modify each value individually? So if we were to go into, say, this object, grab its alpha and set it to target gradients alpha instantaneously, and then do the same thing for its time values, then do the same thing down here for color keys, but obviously for color, need to change these as well. Change these to color, and then we don't do a hard set. I would expect this does the same thing as setting it to equal. And if this does work, it validates that at the very least we're allowed to modify these values. If this doesn't work, it implies that you're not allowed to change a height gradient at like runtime, I guess? That didn't work. Okay. So we're not allowed to adjust the height gradient at runtime, question mark? I'm curious to see what happens when we actually debug. Does it just fail to set the value? So we come into here. Value is 1. Value is 1. Perfect. Time 0, 0. Good enough. 0 point something. These values are also identical. I mean, that probably makes sense. These values are slightly different, but not by much. So this needs to become 0.89. It did not work. They are public values. This should be 0.36. This should be even more clear. It's still 1. So even though these are just float values, I is changing, right? Yeah. Alpha 1. Like, excuse me, what? I've never used this gradient class before, so maybe this is just a function of it, is that, like, once the keys are set, they can't be modified by script. But we're definitely seeing the problem, which is that if we modify the value, it just doesn't take. Like, float equal float, and it just completely fails. Maybe it's because it's like part of Unity system. There's like hidden functionality here that we don't see, or it's getting updated somewhere else. Okay. We know that setting the height gradient does work, though. So what we could do is we could write a function I'm gonna have to look at some DoTween stuff, but what we could do is write a custom function that loops over time. You can write your own custom templatized functions as well. You can write custom versions. So yeah, we might need to write a custom one for gradient. That each time it gets a timestamp update, it like rebuilds a brand new gradient that has the percentage changes between them. So whatever that would be. Essentially, it's just lerping between the two values. Creates a new instance of that and then just sets the height gradient every frame, essentially. It sounds like it could be expensive, but it's probably fine because it's still just doing a set call. Never made a custom option before. Yeah, and it's not going to give it to me easily. Yeah, I might need to do some research on this. Okay, so let's leave this for now then. I don't necessarily want to do all this research on stream. Just want to double check to see if there's an easier way to do this. There's two, but is there like variation of this that is like just give it a function and it handles it? No, I'd have to do more looking around that I'm probably going to find. Okay. I'm going to have to do a bit of work, but I think the simple version of this essentially is that we're going to write a function or a setup where we're manually modifying these values. And we interpolate between each of these based off of our lerp value. And we're essentially going to just set equal to the constructed gradient that we build, because we can't do it piecemeal like this. Okay. Okay. So this was like both easy and also going to be a pain. It's kind of where I thought it was going to end up, to be honest. Just working with a data type I'm not familiar with. For the time being, we're going to leave it so that it just hard sets the color, so it essentially just pops instead of smoothly transitioning between the two fog types. And we're going to move on. The other half of this that I wanted to do was I wanted to play with the brightness value. So before we go right to the final version, I kind of want an intermediate level. We used to do like an exposure kind of like glow. The environment would get like dark and then get a bit bright before returning back to normal. But with a lot of this alpha, our exposure code just kind of breaks for some really silly reasons. Yeah, so that's working ish. So instead of doing the exposure, I think I want to have the fog glow to indicate the like cleansing effect. So we're going to need another sequence step. This one is going to be just affecting a single integer value, so we'll use turbulence as a base. And this should just be adjusting fog brightness. Okay. And this will be our target brightness. Good. Target brightness goes here. And there should be just a brightness value that we can adjust on the settings. And there is. Perfect. That should be everything we need. Okay. So we're going to come into here for TO4. And we're going to make it so it's going to start by switching its color. Then it's going to, I think, adjust the height up first. Fog height. over... I don't know, maybe a second? Oh, did I create the wrong one? I did. Fog. Height, not height gradient. That might get confusing. I have a feeling that I'll probably make that mistake a few times. Let's see here. So, 1 second. Quad, in, out. And then let's go to like 4 height. So we'll go fairly large. And then fog. Brightness. Bring that up here. Non-blocking. Over a second. And out quad. Go to like 2 brightness. Actually, what I think I want to do is I'll make this one the blocking one. We'll go to 2 brightness, and then we need to lower the brightness back down after it's finished. So we're going to go to this high brightness, and then over 1 second, we're going to go back down to 1. Then we're going to adjust our height back down at the same time. Going to get rid of the specular. Probably want to do this at the same time as changing the color. Turbulence, wind direction, and then the fog height comes back down. That all seems reasonable. Let's see what that looks like. Give that a try. The height's too large. The fog volume normally is at 1010. So I'm going to move it up a little bit, like in height, not just... So we're going to not just scale, because height is really just like changing the actual physical height of the fog volume. This is going to be moving it up from negative 0.3 to 0.3. And then we're also going to want to move it back down afterwards. I want to see what this looks like. It might also look bad. Negative 0.3. 10 over 1 second. Oh, I need to give it the fog volume name. Perfect. Interesting. That didn't play out exactly how I thought it was going to. Are these move to positions blocking by default? They are, but they're not manipulating... Like for these ones, these are just a serialized protected field. And then instead of modifying backing field, just do that. good chance this breaks something, because we're modifying a pretty old sequence step. Yeah, but now we can set these to be non-blocking, which should make it look a little more like what I was envisioning. Yeah, closer. I think the height doesn't need to go up anymore. Like, maybe... Yeah, I just don't think we need to raise the height if we're going to move it up. I think this 0.3 might be too much, though. Let's give this a try. I just want it to feel like it's like pulsing with this like glow effect. It gets brighter, it grows in size, and then it like dissipates. Yeah, it's fine. I think it's really hard to tell without the color shifting kind of gradually. Having the color just pop like this is kind of making it really difficult to get a sense of whether or not this is going to work. It's also possible it might not, and I'll have to go back to the drawing board a little bit. But we have the controls hooked up. We have all these scripts now that let us modify these values. It might be a matter of playing with them. Yeah, and I almost feel like maybe there's an in-between color we can go to that's like a warm kind of teal, if we can get the color gradient stuff working, so that it like changes to this like more like goddess color and then like pulses to a more bright version of it and then calms down. I think color is going to be the big thing that makes this work. I just don't think it's going to work without it. Okay. Oh, nope. Okay. Trying to see... This is what we want. This is the generic version. Okay. So instead of doing it the setting and getting way, we can just pass a method in. So we want to do tween dot to, and we want to pass in. See, that doesn't show up here, but it says it should just be a function which is a function that just takes a float value. Yep, that is one of the variations. Okay, so then if I just do... my method... update height gradient is what this is going to do. This is still going to need to do a... The problem is this function isn't going to have the context. Can I do a lambda, I guess? Which isn't great, but would have the contextual information it needs. Yeah, this would allow me to keep the scope so that we can do volumetric profile dot height gradient is equal to gradient result, and then result is here. Unassigned local variable. Just going to make a new one. And then result is going to equal the lerp float value, which is going to allow me to interpolate between the volumetric height profiles. We're going to have to do all of these. We're going to have to grab this whole chunk of code. We're going to grab result. This is messy. There's got to be a better way to clean this up, but let's see if we can actually get it functional. So the alpha key I is going to be equal to the profile's alpha key value how do I do this lerp? I guess the simpler there's I want to combine the two values together at each frame. I haven't had to do this type of code in a while. I think, is it this value here? Let's make some local variables just so this is going to be easier to keep track of. This is the start alpha. This is the, no, we'll go with end alpha. It's a little bit more common of a term. And then we want to do, I think, end alpha, start alpha divided by end alpha times lerp plus start alpha. Purely coding off vibes right now. I don't think this is right. Brackets shouldn't matter here, but just for clarity. Okay. So if our start alpha is 0 and our end alpha is, say, 1. No, this isn't right. I don't think. Because if end alpha is ever 0, we're dividing by 0. Okay. Quick Google search says to me that what I'm trying to do is start alpha plus, which I was right on that part. Then it's times 1 minus the lerp value. Plus the end alpha times the lerp value. That makes sense, I guess. Kind of. So if we're doing start alpha is 0, and lerp value starts at 0 when we are at the beginning of the timeline, essentially, then we do 0 times 0, and then end alpha, which is 1, plus, or end alpha times 0, which is 0 plus, so 0 plus 0 ends up being nothing. So then if we had 0.5, then we'd have 1 minus 0.5, so halfway between will be basically 0.5 for both of these sections. And if start alpha is 0, then 0 times 0.5 is still 0. So if start alpha is ever 0, this whole section is basically non-relevant. But then end alpha, which is 1, would be half. So that makes sense. But if our start alpha is something like 0.5, then it'll be 0.5 when our lerp value is 0. If we're at 0.5, it would be 0.5 times 0.5, which is 0.25. And then the end alpha being 1 would be 0.5 halfway through times 1 plus that 0.25, which will get us halfway in between. Okay, so yeah, I've validated the functionality here. This should work. Somewhat unnecessary brackets. And then this becomes the time values. And this becomes... I'm just going to rename these to start and end, so that we don't need as much initialization of local values. Realistically, we should just get rid of all of these, because they're just adding extra fluff, but I just want it to be readable while we debug, and we can condense it down once we better understand it. All right, so here we're doing the same thing, but instead we're doing it with color, which is more confusing because now we're not just doing a lerp between this one does need these values. Okay, here, time still remains the same. Problem is we can't just do this. All right, Unity lerp color. Hey, look at that, there's a function for it. Color.lerp. Start color, end color, and the lerp value. By that logic, does that mean there is also a float.lerp? No, of course not. You gotta do that manually. Double check. mathf.lerp is what I'm looking for. Even better. So from start value to end value to lerp. Great. Simpler. Now I don't have to validate the math. I know it's doing what I want. Okay. Now I think, actually, I feel much more confident doing this. Which is just going to get rid of all these local variables. Much simpler. Okay, and then we're going to validate everything real quick. So we are going for alpha keys, lerping between the height gradients alpha keys alpha and the target gradients alpha keys alpha. We're going for alpha keys time, lerping between the height gradients alpha keys time and the target gradients alpha keys time. Color, 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 color keys to color, and then color keys time, time, and time. So that should all work. So this should give us a resulting gradient, which is in between the two values. Slight difference here. Technically speaking, we need to construct these because this value won't have anything in that spot yet. Okay. So then what are these? These are gradient alpha key. We'll make a list of these. Like so. And technically speaking, this will be a gradient color key equals gradient alpha key This is better. Perfect. And then at the very end, we can do results dot alpha keys is equal to gradient alpha keys. It doesn't like it. Oh, because these are arrays, so we need to do two array. Not my favorite code I've ever written. This is probably inefficient and a bit slow, especially for something that's going to be lerped over, but let's start here. So this is going to be lerping from 0 to 1, and it's going to be lerping over whatever seconds is supposed to be. And can I do a dot ease, set ease? We can still do this, passing in the ease value for this. Perfect. Does this allow us to gradually switch between the two colors? Also, did we write any bugs? No immediate errors. We'll see about at runtime though. Cool. Felt like it was doing the thing, but I'm just going to make it a really long time just so that we can see it slowly transition from one color set to the other. That doesn't look to be doing anything. Because I modified the wrong one. I want this near the top. That's also probably part of the reason it didn't feel like it was working correctly. And then the sun color can be up here too, that's fine. Let's do the same thing. I just want to see it. I imagine now that it's moved up, it'll look better, but let's still just set it to 10 seconds just to see it slowly change colors. Okay. Failing. Pretty spectacularly. The start value should be from A to B over time. So from this value to this value over time. Okay. We're going to have to debug it and see if I've got some sort of logical problem here, but it looked like it still snapped the color. Oh, yeah, because this line still exists. So yeah, I'm totally telling it to lerp over time, but it's also immediately doing, after we set up the whole like transition function to switch between them, it just immediately sets the color, so it wouldn't matter anyways. Okay, for real this time, come on. I believe that we can switch colors. I'm going to take away the breakpoint. I believe it should just work. No. Okay. What is still not working? It does eventually work, though, because it does change color at the very end. It's just not doing it step by step. Okay, at this point we've set a new result. It has... That's probably fine. It has some preset values, but we're going to just replace those, I think. At this point, the lerp values are pretty small. We're looping from 1 to 1, so that one doesn't matter. Here we're lerping between the same values, so this one doesn't matter. This is the first one where it's actually changing, but the change is so small it won't really be noticeable. So from here it's going from 1 to 0.36. So we should see some sort of drop here. And we do. Okay, so that is slowly changing. Okay. And then here, I would expect there to also be color changes. These are different colors. Nope, these are the same colors. Virtually the same colors. Very different colors. Yeah, and that's a little bit in between the two of them. That wants to be... Oh, maybe it's actually not that big of a difference between those. Let's add watches for these. Very small difference between them. This one at least had a more noticeable change. We're still only at a very small lerp amount, so it makes sense. But they are changing. Now we set results to have the same alpha and color keys. And then we're setting this one to have the same alpha and color keys. So they should be modifying at this point. Let's do a few skips here till the lerp value is something in between the two of them. We should also be able to check here and see if the color is actually changing as we debug through this. I'm going to try and check the colors. So here we're lerping between like 30% between them. These ones are identical. Identical. Oh. Technically speaking, this value we're lerping over is being modified as we go. We need to save the initial values and use that. Yeah, common problems I should have caught. Essentially, we're moving the goalpost as we're trying to, like, move between them, which is never going to work out great for us. So we're going to just do the exact same thing we're doing in the loop, but up at the top to construct a set of new values. So we're not lerping between anything here. We're just, like, constructing a new gradient that's local to this function that is not going to be modified. Alright, so that should work. And then start gradient dot alpha keys is equal to gradient alpha keys, and do the same thing for the colors. Dot to array. Why did I not grab just this? Better. Now here, instead of using the volumetric fog profile to modify, let's just grab the start value. I wonder if that could have been the problem with like doing it with all of these from the beginning too. No, I think this thing's smart enough that that should have been okay. Stop debugging. So we're going from the start values and then updating and constructing. Okay. Let's try that. Nope, it still just pops at some point. I suppose we could take a look at the actual fog volume to see if the values are changing in real time, but it doesn't seem like it's going to. So we should be watching this, and this should be changing to a different gradient slowly. Oh, what? How did we get through the area without revealing everything? Interesting. I'm gonna have it selected to start with here. I can see it changing here. That's wild. So the height gradient is being modified, it's just not getting updated. Like the fog isn't updating in real time because of it, but we can see it slowly modifying. So what if we had this not blocking, but like the sun color also change over 10 seconds? Oh, actually, you know what? Is it because the sun color isn't changing? Those two colors may need to be modified together. No, it doesn't seem to be. Like, what? I can see they're changing here. They're physically being modified. But for whatever reason, it's not coming across. In the actual fog system. So it seems like my actual modifications are actually being sent, but the fog just isn't respecting them. Because this is very clearly still purple. Until the moment when we like change the height of it. Like something causes it to eventually be like, okay, yeah, you're good. You can now switch color. Like some change is eventually taking, but it's slowly modifying. Just, it doesn't look like it's changing. So maybe it's working, but it's just something about like my flawed understanding of how it should look as it's in those in-between states. Well, let's just see if we come into here and we just change this from this gradient to this gradient. Okay, yeah, that has an immediate effect. Like, yeah, there's still some purple highlights and stuff from the sun color and stuff. But, like, just changing this without even changing this to, like, the blue. Yeah, the blue doesn't even have that big of an impact. Just changing the gradient should be more than enough for the fog to change color. But it doesn't take... Even though I can see it in the UI actually being modified, other values switching, it's not until some point when, like, it's like, oh no, you're good, that it just like toggles. I'm wondering if it's like some other parameter being modified is triggering the fog to actually update. Like, is it modifying the brightness causes it to, like, take over? Maybe, honestly. Because now the gradient has changed, but it hasn't updated. But if I toggle enable height gradient on and off, it does change. So there may be some other modified value, like something else that we're changing that causes it to update. So if we were to add, like, say, fog brightness, for example, drag that all the way up to the top here. And we just had it say changing that fog brightness to 1.1 over 10 seconds. If the fog brightness was changing at the same time, would that be enough for it to actually us to see the color shift? Even if it was a very subtle change in brightness, would that be enough for the fog system to get the message that the gradient has been modified? No. Like, I could debug to make sure that the values are being set, but we can physically see that, like, this value here is changing to be the correct height, the height gradient over time. It is being modified. But for some reason, even after we're fully done, what if this is like, just like 1 second, just to, well, no, because we want it to be long enough that we can see. I'm not sure how else to validate what's going on. Is it the movement, maybe? What if we move the object? Is that enough to cause it to trigger? Base. Move to position. Drag this all the way up. Instead of modifying brightness, what if we move to negative 2.5 over 10 seconds. We need to give it the fog volume to move. Neat, but still not doing what we wanted. I forgot to set the X and Y, so it just kind of shifted off over time to somewhere near the center of the screen, but it still wasn't updating the gradient color. Oh, and it was like set to only 2 seconds still, so it should have been Yeah, something else is causing it to update. Because if it was only 2 seconds for it to transition to the gradient, it was like traveling for like the whole time here. So it's not this thing. Could it be adjusting the fog's height? Not the height gradient, but just the height value. Make that blocking, make it like 10 seconds, set it to out quadratic, and then what is the height that we're eventually going towards? 2, so we're lowering. It's like just do a height of like 2.3 or something, so it just slowly decreases in height over 10 seconds. Does that cause the height gradient to update? No. Still purple, and then just all of a sudden it gets a refresh. Can't manually call update on it. Validate settings. This is just making sure all the settings are valid. Requires update. What is this normally called? Update material properties now. Enforces a immediate mirror material properties update. I feel like this is probably what's actually changing the color. And this only happens if it requires an update. I think this code isn't getting hit consistently. On enable. Where are all the spots? On validate. If it detects the settings have changed. Oh, you're kidding me. Can I use that? This is just a public function. Oh, you're kidding me. Well, the more you know. I believe what that's saying is I can just do... Given two different profiles, I can just lerp between them. So how I... Oh my goodness. Okay, so I've recreated all of these steps, which allowed me to, like, essentially convert one profile to another profile. But it has a lerp function built in. And then validate settings is called at the end. Okay, so I'm pretty sure if I do this, it'll also work, but there's a good chance I can replace basically all of my code that I've written this evening over the past, like, 2 hours with just one sequence step that allows me to lerp between two of these. I mean, yeah. I can try and rationalize that, like, what I've done allows me to very minutely adjust specific settings, which is true, but I think for the purposes of what we're doing here, just being able to lerp between two settings would be great. Yeah, so we need to call validate as we change stuff, and the color just shifts. All right, well, we're almost at time. We're going to very quickly write the sequence step that I probably should have wrote 2 hours ago. I mean, it's not that straightforward, but it's probably still straightforward enough. So we're going to do a adjust fog. I guess this is like really a swap fog profile sequence step. We're going to copy this, put it here. Swap fog profile. This will need a reference to a volumetric fog profile, I'm pretty sure. Let's double check. .lerp. It needs a volumetric fog profile. So we'll want to have a target one of these. Okay, and then for the sake of simplicity, we're just going to make a new value. I'll clean this up after stream. This time I will actually do that too. This will be the last thing I do this evening. But for the sake of just testing, we kind of want to back up. The problem is when we do the settings, we get an instantiation of the profile. The profile itself is also public though. So I guess we could just do a volumetric profile. Initial setting, initial profile. Does this work? Because this will get us the profile, but if we call settings, it'll instantiate it. Which we will want to do after the fact. Yeah, I might need to do some experimentation here, but let's assume... You know what, even easier, just for the sake of testing, we'll just make an initial profile as well. And then we will lerp between the initial profile and the target profile over lerp amount. Okay. Won't be able to speed this up. At least not by default. I'll have to do some work if I want to have the speed stuff working. We're not doing this from code, so I'm not going to worry about building the constructors. I just want to see if this works. Yeah. For the sake of simplicity, let's go to a different room. TO3. We're going to set this one to be at -0.3. And then it's going to get the preset here. We are going to turn off the enemy in this area. This one. Turns out there isn't a slime here. Did I not fully reveal the space? There we go. Okay, so this is a room we can fully reveal. We're going to go to its reveal functions. We're going to delete the exposure stuff because that breaks with the fog. We're going to come in here. We're going to write a swap fog profile. We're going to make that blocking over 10 seconds. And we're going to swap it from the base one going to the cleansed version. And we'll do that. Let's do out quad. Oh, and we will still need to give it the name, which will be fog volume. All I had to do was look at the actual fog profile and just see if it had a lerp function. That's all I had to do. Why would it not have a lerp? Ooh. Oh, different room. We need to... I need to prefab this and then drag the prefab between every room, and then we can modify this stuff once. But for now, this needs the entity fog volume so it can be found. Technically, the previous room we were in had that entity. This one doesn't. Again, if it was a prefab, this would be much simpler. Because I still only have it in the first few rooms. We need to go through and actually hook the system up to every room. Interesting. They already have a lerp function for gradients. But the values cannot exceed 8. Why? But why? Says who? I'll look into it further when I'm off camera and try and figure out why it has that value. If we have to limit it to 8 keys, we can do that. It's just not ideal. Feels somewhat arbitrary, but maybe there's some reason why you can't do more than 8. Like maybe it's a unity limitation. Yep, that just works. Still very confused on why a hard limit of 8. Like, that seemed to work fine. Maybe it's a performance thing? Interesting. Okay, let's see here. So then if we have that set up like that, can we instead also do swap? Instead of going to cleanse, let's go to pulse. And then from pulse to cleansed, let's do this one over, say, 1 second, and do this one over 2. Out quad, this one goes to in out quad, and then the gradient value thing doesn't matter, it can get deleted eventually. I missed the spot. Interesting. This one has a value of 2. Did I mess up what I was telling it to go to? This should have been initial volume pulse. This is cleansed. Interesting. So it has a height of 3.5 here and a height of 3.5 here. But if it ended on cleansed, cleanse should have had a custom height of 2. Oh. Didn't give it an actual entity to apply its effects to. That would do it. The one thing about doing it this way is technically it is a little bit more intensive memory-wise because we have to modify every single value, but this is also so much nicer to be able to just like at a glance just like switch from one profile to another. Yeah, that's what I wanted. Okay, well, we have several ways of tackling this problem. We can take the very easy route of just swapping between 2 profiles, which the system accounts for. This package is fantastic. What a great like bit of code and like shader work, and just really, really good. I'm gonna call it out again. It's been fantastic. It does everything I want. It feels like in a lot of ways I'm the one causing it to be bad. It could be a lot better, I just need to learn how it works a little bit more. Yeah, that maybe doesn't sell the cleansing the darkness as much as I'd like, but that's partly to do with that pulse one. I think the pulse one could be a little different. Where is that to? Can we... Yeah, this is probably too high of a height, like 3, 2.7 maybe even, something simple like that. And then I feel like it's maybe even slightly too like high. Just lower it a little bit. And this is also the beauty of doing it with the profiles, is it's so much easier to just be able to like modify it, change it, tweak it, and then be like, yeah, this seems better. And then you can like see all of the tweaks you're making all in real time. It does mean that my sequence steps need to have direct references to these objects, which I'm not thrilled about, because I think that adds a little bit of extra to the packaging. Yeah. To be fair, I feel like by increasing the height by 2.7 and the vertical offset down by 2.5, this is probably just doing the same thing as leaving it at this height. I'll play with that more though to see. There's so many settings to play with. Well, we're a little bit over. I think, although we struggled a bit, I think we came to a much better understanding. Yeah, this is basically doing the same thing that I was writing, except this, the set keys thing is interesting. Yeah, and the validate settings was the thing I was missing. If we're going to alert between some of these values, not all of them are updating automatically. Most specifically, it's the gradients. It seems like when we modify a height gradient, it won't just auto update. Yeah, all this other validate setting stuff seems fine, but it's specifically the depth gradient and the height gradient that needs to transfer the information from the actual like property that we see in the editor to the actual texture behind the scenes. Cool. Okay. Everything else is fine to modify at will, but these ones, if we do any kind of like, if we decide to keep our standalone sequence steps for modifying the height gradient, we just need to make sure that we actually call validate settings afterwards. It's so much cleaner too, like just looking at the TO3 version where we're just swapping between these two references and this one, just night and day difference in terms of the amount of like manual editing we have to do. All right, well, it's been fun. Unlockable characters with the hydrate on the way out. I will do that here as soon as we finish stream. But yeah, we are in a good spot. I'm liking the way the fog is feeling. I'm pretty happy with the pulse effect of like cleansing the environment. I think it could be a little better, but I think it's also fine. Ooh, one thing me and Drixie didn't talk about, which I'm just realizing I'll have to figure out, is what happens if you fully cleansed an environment? And then you run out of time. Oh, that's interesting. It applies the run out of time effects, but to the new volume. Yeah, another reason why swap volume effect would just be a cleaner way of doing that, because then we guarantee that we go to the actual version of the fog we want. Okay. Well, very cool. Yeah, this one's old too. I need to go through every scene and update it to a prefabbed version of the fog volume so that everyone is identical. We'll probably be back Saturday or Sunday. I'm not sure exactly when, with more streams. We're getting close though to like a demo. I've been saying that for a couple months, but it actually, like, I'm running out of stuff on my list. So hopefully have some more combat stuff the weekend to talk about on stream, but I hope this fog stuff was interesting to someone. For now though, this is going to be Tolhi signing